This is the story of the Easter dinner that changed everything. The day I walked into my parents' house carrying a homemade pie after a 12-hour hospital shift and heard my mother tell a room full of relatives that I wasn't welcome at their table. What she didn't know was that someone else was listening too. Someone whose presence would force the truth into the open in a way I'd been too afraid to do for 40 years. This is the story of how I finally stopped being invisible. I should have known something was wrong when I pulled into my parents' driveway and saw all the cars already there. It was Easter Sunday, just after 3 in the afternoon. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift in the ER. A shift that had included 2 cardiac arrests, one kid with a broken arm from falling off a trampoline, and an elderly woman who'd waited too long to come in with chest pain. I was exhausted, but I'd still stopped at home to shower and change, and I'd made a pie from scratch because my mother had mentioned weeks ago that she was too busy with preparations to bake this year. The cherry pie sat on the passenger seat, still slightly warm, next to a card I'd picked out for my mother. The driveway was packed with vehicles I recognized: my sister Jennifer's SUV, my Aunt Carol's sedan, my Uncle Mike's truck. I parked on the street and sat there for a moment, gathering my energy. I could see people moving around inside through the windows. The dining room curtains were open, and I caught glimpses of the table set with my mother's good china. My chest tightened with that familiar feeling, the sense that I was about to walk into a room where everyone else had been having fun without me. I grabbed the pie and the card and walked up the front path. The door was unlocked, as it always was during family gatherings. I stepped into the hallway quietly, not wanting to interrupt if something was happening. I could hear voices from the dining room: my mother's distinctive laugh, Jennifer's higher-pitched voice, the murmur of conversation. I was about to call out, to announce myself, when I heard my mother's voice clearly. "You're not welcome at this table." I froze. My heart stopped. The pie trembled slightly in my hands. For a second, I thought she must be talking to someone else. Maybe a neighbor who'd stopped by uninvited? But then I heard my own name. I mean it. Sarah always brings negativity. My mother's voice carried that tone she used when she was being confidential, sharing complaints with people she trusted. She walks in with that martyred expression, like she's doing us a favor by showing up. Like working at the hospital makes her special, like she's better than the rest of us. I couldn't move. I stood in the hallway, every muscle locked, the cherry pie growing heavier in my hands. Jennifer's voice, uncomfortable. "Mom, she can probably hear you. She said she'd be here around 3. "She's not here yet." I checked. My mother sounded certain, almost pleased with herself. "And honestly, I don't care if she does hear. I'm tired of pretending." Every holiday, she shows up acting like we owe her something. She never contributes anything meaningful, just her presence and her judgment. This year, I decided we'd have a peaceful Easter without her. My Aunt Carol's voice, hesitant. "That seems harsh, Linda. Is it?" My mother's voice strengthened, gaining confidence. "She's 42, single, no children, living in that sad little apartment. What does she have to contribute to a family gathering? Jennifer has given us grandchildren. She's built a real life. Sarah's just there, working all the time, acting exhausted, making us feel guilty for having normal family joy." The pie was definitely trembling now. Or maybe it was my hands. I couldn't tell which. "I told her not to come today," my mother continued. "I texted her last week. Maybe now she'll finally get the message." What I didn't know, what my mother didn't know, was that Dr. Patricia Chen, my colleague and friend from the hospital, I was sitting in the living room around the corner from where I stood. Patricia, whom my mother had met exactly once at a hospital charity event and had been desperate to impress ever since. Patricia, who'd been invited to this dinner months ago as my mother's attempt to show off that her daughter knew important doctors. Patricia, who could hear every single word. I watched, numb, as Patricia rose from the living room sofa. Her expression was unreadable, but I could see her jaw tighten. Our eyes met across the hallway. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Patricia walked toward the dining room, and I realized everything was about to change. To understand how I ended up standing in that hallway, you need to know how it started. You need to see the girl I was before I learned to make herself smaller. I was 10 years old the first time I realized I was different from Jennifer in a way that mattered more than just the 3 years between us. It was a Tuesday afternoon in May, and I'd just won first place at the regional science fair. I'd spent weeks building a model that demonstrated how water filtration works, staying up late testing different materials, making careful notes. When they called my name at the award ceremony, I'd felt this pure joy, the kind that makes your chest feel too small to contain it. I ran all the way home from the bus stop, my blue ribbon clutched in my hand, my certificate rolled up carefully in my backpack. I burst through the front door calling for my parents. They were in the living room. My mother sat on the floor, surrounded by fabric and sequins, working on what I recognized as Jennifer's dance recital costume. Jennifer, 7 years old, stood on a chair while our mother pinned the hem. My father sat on the couch with the newspaper. "Mom, Dad, look!" I held up the ribbon. "I won first place in the whole region." My mother glanced up briefly. "That's nice, Sarah. Very studious of you." Then, immediately back to Jennifer. "Hold still, sweetheart. I'm almost done with this section." My father looked up from his paper, smiled vaguely. "Good job, kiddo. Proud of you." Then back to his reading. I stood there, my ribbon suddenly feeling less important, less real. The judges said my project was the best they'd seen in my age group. I tried again. "That's wonderful, dear," my mother said without looking at me. "Go put it in your room. Jennifer's recital is in 2 hours, and I still need to do her hair." I walked slowly up to my room, placed the ribbon on my desk, and looked at it for a long time. Later that evening, after Jennifer's dance recital, which the entire extended family came to watch, I heard my mother on the phone with my grandmother. "Jennifer was absolutely beautiful tonight, a natural performer. Sarah? Oh, she won something at school. Science thing, I think. You know Sarah. Always buried in her books." The pattern was set that day, though I was too young to name it. Sarah's achievements were private, expected, unremarkable. Jennifer's achievements, even the small ones, were celebrated publicly, treated as special. Over the years, I learned to read the signs. I learned that when I came home excited about something, I should check first whether Jennifer had something going on. I learned that my parents' attention was finite, and Jennifer's needs always came first. When I made the honor roll, my mother would say, "Of course you did. You're a good student." When Jennifer got a B instead of her usual C, my mother would frame the report card and call relatives to share the news. I learned to find validation through being useful. If I helped with the dishes, took care of Jennifer when our parents were busy, cleaned the house without being asked, my mother would smile at me and say, "Sarah's so responsible. I can always count on her." That praise became my drug. If I couldn't be celebrated for my achievements, I'd be valued for my usefulness. My father was present but passive, always deferring to my mother's preferences. Sometimes he'd pull me aside and tell me privately that he was proud of me, but he never contradicted my mother's treatment in front of others. It was easier for him to let things be the way they were. By the time I was a teenager, I'd absorbed the message completely. Jennifer was the child worth investing in. I was the child who'd be fine on her own. When I was 17, I told my parents I wanted to be a nurse. I'd been volunteering at a local clinic, and I'd discovered I was good at taking care of people. It made sense. It was the role I'd been playing at home my entire life. My mother's response: "That's practical. You'll always have work. Nursing is stable." 2 months later, Jennifer got accepted to State University for communications. She'd applied on a whim, had mediocre grades, no particular career goals. But my mother threw a party. 30 people, catered food, and a banner that said, "Congratulations, Jennifer." I was there, of course, helping serve drinks, clearing plates, making sure everyone was comfortable. I'd been accepted to nursing school with a partial scholarship, but no one had thrown me a party. No one had thought to. At Jennifer's party, I overheard my mother telling relatives, "Sarah's always been independent. She doesn't need much attention. She's got her path figured out. Jennifer, though, she needs our support and guidance to find her way." I was 18 when I moved out for nursing school. I remember loading my car with my belongings. Not many, since I'd been expected to share most things with Jennifer growing up. My mother hugged me briefly and said, "You'll be fine. You've always been fine." She was right. I was fine. I became fine at being fine. And I just never realized until much later that fine wasn't the same as loved. My 20s and 30s passed in a blur of double shifts, exhaustion, and the persistent, quiet hope that maybe this time, this achievement, would be enough. I graduated nursing school at 22 and started working in the ER at County General Hospital. The work was brutal: 12-hour shifts, constant crisis, patients who were scared and hurt and sometimes dying. But I was good at it. I was good at staying calm when everyone else was panicking, good at finding veins on the first try, good at talking to families in the worst moments of their lives. My colleagues noticed. By 25, I was considered one of the most reliable nurses on the floor. By 28, I was named Employee of the Year, a real honor, chosen by both staff and patient feedback. I remember calling my mother to tell her. I was standing outside the hospital on my break, the award certificate in my other hand, genuinely excited to share this with her. "Mom, guess what? I was named Employee of the Year at the hospital." "That's wonderful, dear." Her voice was distracted. "Listen, can you come over this weekend? We need to discuss Jennifer's bridal shower. She wants it to be at that venue downtown, and we need to figure out who's paying for what." My achievement was acknowledged in one sentence. Then we spent 30 minutes talking about Jennifer's bridal shower arrangements. The award ceremony was the following Thursday. My parents came. They said they would. They arrived 20 minutes late during the middle of the speeches. They sat in the back. When my name was called and I walked up to receive my award, I looked out at the audience and saw my father checking his watch. After the ceremony, there was a small reception, coffee and cookies, a chance to meet the families of other award winners. My mother approached me, gave me a quick hug. "Congratulations. This is nice. Listen, we need to leave for a cake tasting appointment for Jennifer's wedding. You understand?" They left before I'd even had a chance to introduce them to my director. I stood there with my award certificate, watching them walk out, and reminded myself that they'd come at all, which was more than I'd expected. Jennifer's wedding was beautiful. She married Marcus, a real estate agent who drove a nice car and talked about his commission checks. My mother spent 6 months planning that wedding, treating it like a royal event. I contributed $3,000 for the flowers and photography because my mother said they were a bit short on funds. No one thanked me at the wedding. In fact, no one mentioned that I'd helped pay for it at all. Family gatherings became increasingly painful. Every few months we'd have Sunday dinner at my parents' house. The conversations followed a predictable pattern. Relatives would ask me, "Still at the hospital? That must be exhausting." "It is," I'd say, "but it's rewarding. Last week we saved a woman who—" "That's great," they'd interrupt, already turning to Jennifer. "And how are the kids? I saw the photos from your vacation. It looked amazing." Then everyone would spend the next hour discussing Jennifer's life, her remodel, her children, her social plans. My career was treated as slightly unfortunate, something I'd chosen that made me perpetually tired. Jennifer's ordinary suburban life was treated as interesting and aspirational. Have you ever been in a room full of your family and felt completely alone? That was every gathering for me. The complicated thing was that I didn't hate Jennifer. I loved my sister. She was kind in a thoughtless, privileged way. She'd call me asking for advice about her kids or her marriage, expecting my immediate attention, genuinely confused when I said I was at work and would call back later. "Can't you take a quick break?" she'd ask. "It'll just take a few minutes." She didn't understand that I couldn't just step away from a patient having a heart attack to discuss whether her son should play soccer or baseball. My mother had trained both of us to accept this hierarchy. Jennifer's needs were legitimate and urgent. Mine were secondary and could wait. Jennifer was allowed to be stressed about planning a birthday party. I was expected to handle life and death situations without needing support. I dated occasionally during these years, but nothing serious ever developed. Part of it was my schedule: 12-hour shifts, rotating weekends, holidays spent at work. But if I'm honest, part of it was me. I was more comfortable being needed than being vulnerable. I knew how to take care of people. I didn't know how to let someone take care of me. I lived in a small apartment near the hospital, the same apartment I'd moved into when I was 24. It was affordable, practical, close to work. My parents never visited it. "It's so far," my mother would say, though it was a 20-minute drive. They visited Jennifer's house constantly, helping with the kids, bringing meals, doing yard work. When I was 38, I was promoted to charge nurse. It was significant. More responsibility, better pay, recognition of my 15 years of dedicated service. I shared the news at Sunday dinner, feeling that familiar flutter of hope that maybe this time they'd be proud. My mother smiled briefly. "That's nice, Sarah. More responsibility means more stress, though. Don't let work consume you. You need a life outside the hospital." Then, immediately to Jennifer, "Tell everyone about the vacation you're planning. The photos on your phone looked beautiful." I sat there while everyone discussed Jennifer's upcoming trip to the beach. My promotion, the culmination of 15 years of work, received 10 seconds of attention. Her vacation plans dominated dinner. Tell me in the comments, have you ever achieved something significant only to have it dismissed by the people whose opinion matters most to you? Because that's what my entire adult life felt like. I watched my colleagues' families at hospital events. I saw parents who celebrated all their children equally. Parents who recognized that different paths had equal value. Parents who understood that love wasn't a finite resource that had to be rationed. But that wasn't my family. In my family, there was a hierarchy. Jennifer was the success story, the daughter with the traditional life, the grandchildren, the visible achievements. I was the worker, dependable but forgettable, successful but unremarkable, and I accepted it. Because I'd been trained since I was 10 years old to believe that my worth was measured by my usefulness, not my presence. That I had to earn love by being needed, not by simply existing. I was 40 years old before I started to question whether that was actually love at all. The financial exploitation started so gradually that I didn't even recognize it as exploitation. It started when I was 25. Jennifer was getting married and the wedding costs were adding up. My mother called one evening, her voice carefully casual. "Sarah, sweetheart, we're having a small issue with the wedding budget. We're a bit short on the flowers and photography, about $3,000. Could you help us out? Just as a loan, of course. We'll pay you back after the wedding." $3,000 was significant on my nursing salary. But it was Jennifer's wedding, my only sister's special day. Of course I'd help. I transferred the money the next day. My mother said, "Thank you, dear. This means so much." They never paid me back. It was never mentioned again. At the wedding, no one thanked me for the beautiful flowers or the professional photos that had been partially funded by my savings. That should have been my warning. But I told myself family was supposed to help each other. That's what you did. 2 years later, Jennifer and Marcus bought their first house. My parents helped with the down payment. A gift, not a loan. But when they needed furniture and repairs, I got another call. Sarah, Jennifer, and Marcus are a bit stretched with the new mortgage. They need about $5,000 for furniture and some urgent repairs. Could you loan them the money? Just until Marcus's next big commission check comes through. I hesitated. $5,000 was most of my savings, but Jennifer had children now. My niece had just been born. They needed furniture for the nursery. How could I say no to that? I transferred the money. Marcus's commission check apparently went elsewhere. When I carefully mentioned repayment 6 months later, my mother said, "Don't be petty about money, Sarah. Family helps family without keeping score." And that became the pattern for the next 15 years. When I was 30, I paid $4,000 for Jennifer's second child's nursery renovation. When I was 32, I paid $8,000 for what my mother called a necessary medical procedure that turned out to be cosmetic surgery. When I was 33, I paid $3,000 for my father's car repairs. And when I was 35, I paid $7,000 for Jennifer's kitchen remodel. The requests always came with the same framing: temporary, urgent, just until they got back on their feet. And they always came with emotional manipulation. "After everything we've done for you, don't you want your niece and nephew to have opportunities? Your sister is struggling, and you have a stable job. Jennifer would do the same for you if the situations were reversed." But the situations were never reversed, because I was never allowed to struggle. I was never allowed to need help. I was the stable one, the responsible one, the one with the good job who could handle anything. Over 2 years, I paid $12,000 in private school tuition for Jennifer's children because they deserve the best education. I paid $6,000 for my parents' emergency home repairs that turned out to be a deck renovation for their backyard parties. Each time, I told myself it was the last time. Each time, I rebuilt my savings only to watch them disappear into the next family crisis. The wake-up call came when I was 35. My hospital started a mandatory retirement planning program. All employees had to meet with a financial advisor to discuss our long-term security. I sat in the advisor's small office, paperwork spread between us. His name was Daniel, and he had kind eyes that got progressively more concerned as he reviewed my financial history. "Based on your salary and lifestyle," he said carefully, "you should have approximately $90,000 in savings and retirement accounts." He turned his computer screen toward me. I saw the projection, what I should have had versus what I actually had. I had $12,000. Total. "Sarah," Daniel said gently, "you've earned over $1 million in the past 15 years. Where has it gone?" I explained about my family, the loans that were never repaid, the emergencies that turned out to be optional expenses, the constant requests that I couldn't say no to. Daniel's face grew serious. He printed out a document and slid it across the desk. "You've given away approximately $78,000 in 15 years. That's more than a full year of your salary. That's money that should be working for your retirement, building security for your future." He looked at me directly. "Sarah, have any of these loans been repaid?" "No," I admitted. "Has anyone even acknowledged how much you've given?" I thought about my parents' 40th anniversary party last year. I'd contributed $4,500 while being told my contribution should be quiet, so other relatives didn't feel pressured. At the party, my mother's speech had thanked Jennifer for planning this beautiful celebration, and Marcus for being such a generous son-in-law. I wasn't mentioned. "Not really," I said quietly. Daniel sat back in his chair. I see this sometimes. Family members who drain one person's resources while that person keeps hoping things will change. Sarah, you're 42 years old and living in a small apartment, driving a car with 200,000 miles on it, in working constant overtime. Meanwhile, based on what you've told me, your sister lives in a house you helped pay for, sends her children to schools you helped fund, and takes vacations you helped finance. Does that seem fair to you? Put that way, it didn't. But saying so felt disloyal. I left that meeting with a folder full of projections showing what my retirement could have looked like if I'd kept even half of what I'd given away. That night, I sat in my small apartment and cried. But I still couldn't say no. Because somewhere deep inside, I still believed that if I gave enough, did enough, was useful enough, my family would finally love me the way I needed. I was so tired of being useful. I just wanted to matter. And I had no idea that in just a few years, I'd be standing in my parents' hallway, hearing my mother tell a room full of relatives that I contributed nothing meaningful to family gatherings. The person who'd given them $106,000 over 15 years contributed nothing meaningful. That's what I was worth to them. 2 years before that Easter dinner, when I was 40 years old, I made a decision. I started saying no. Not to everything. I wasn't that strong yet. But to some things. When my mother called asking for money, I'd started claiming my own financial difficulties. I'm stretched thin this month, Mom. I can't help right now. She'd sound annoyed, but she'd accept it. And slowly, painfully, I started rebuilding my savings. It took 2 years to save $28,000. $28,000. Modest by most standards, but more than I'd had since my 20s. I didn't tell anyone about it. I kept it in a separate account at a different bank, like a secret, like hope. I started looking at condos. Just looking, nothing serious. But for the first time in my adult life, I let myself imagine owning something, having a space that was truly mine, not just rented, not just temporary. Then, 6 months before Easter, my mother called. "We need to have a family meeting. Can you come over tonight?" My stomach dropped. Family meetings were never good news. I drove to my parents' house after my shift. It was early evening, the sun setting, casting long shadows across their well-maintained lawn. Jennifer's car was already there. I noticed Marcus's car wasn't. Inside, my parents and Jennifer sat in the living room. My father looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. My mother's expression was tight with stress. Jennifer had been crying. Her eyes were red, tissues wadded in her hands. "What's wrong?" I asked, my nurse instincts kicking in. "Is someone hurt?" "Sit down," my mother said. It wasn't a request. I sat, and they told me. Jennifer and Marcus were getting divorced. Marcus had a gambling problem, hidden for years, and had destroyed their finances. Jennifer was losing the house. She had 2 children and no career. She needed to move back home with our parents, but their house needed renovations to accommodate 3 additional people. They needed money for the renovations, for legal fees, for getting Jennifer back on her feet. They needed $35,000. My heart sank through the floor. They needed more than my entire savings. "Why can't you take out a home equity loan?" I asked. My father finally spoke, his voice quiet. "We already have one. We've been helping Jennifer for the past few years without telling you, covering expenses when Marcus's business was slow." He made air quotes. "We didn't realize it was gambling debts. We're financially extended." I looked at Jennifer. She was crying harder now. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I didn't know. I thought he was working late, but he was at casinos. Everything's gone. The house, the savings, everything." I thought about her social media posts from just last month. A family vacation, professional photos with the kids, her new kitchen appliances, all of it built on gambling debts and my parents' secret financial support. "I've been saving to buy a condo," I said. "I'm supposed to close in a few months." My mother's face hardened. "At your age, renting is probably more practical anyway. You're single, you work constantly. Why do you need to own? Jennifer has children, real responsibilities. This is about family, Sarah. Don't be selfish." There it was. That word. Selfish. After giving them $78,000 over 15 years. After sacrificing every dream, every plan, every chance at my own security. After working myself to exhaustion while they lived comfortably, I was selfish for hesitating. "I need time to think," I managed to say. My mother looked offended. "Think about what? Your sister needs you. Her children need stability. What is there to think about?" I left without answering. I drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I called Patricia. We'd been friends for 10 years, colleagues who'd become close through countless shifts together. She knew my family was complicated, but I'd never told her everything. That night, I did. "Sarah," Patricia said when I finished, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This is financial abuse. They've taken $78,000 from you over 15 years. Now they want your last savings? For your sister's ex-husband's gambling debts? This has to stop." "But she has children," I said. "They need help. They need help from people who haven't already given everything. Sarah, you've been working double shifts for 15 years to fund their lifestyle. When does it end?" I couldn't answer that, because I didn't know if it ever ended. The next day, I told them I'd give them the money. $28,000. Everything I had. My mother barely thanked me. She just said, "We knew we could count on you." Jennifer hugged me, crying, promising she'd pay me back someday. I transferred the money that afternoon. My condo dream disappeared in seconds. I told myself it was temporary, that I was helping my sister through a crisis, that this was what family meant. 3 months later, I stopped by my parents' house unannounced to drop off some medical forms my mother had requested. The renovations were finished. Beautiful new paint, new furniture in what was clearly Jennifer's space, updated fixtures. I saw Jennifer's car in the driveway, not the old sedan I'd expected, but a newer model. Inside, I found my mother and Jennifer in the kitchen, looking at something on Jennifer's phone. They were laughing. "It's only a week," Jennifer was saying. "Just a short trip to Disney. The kids need something fun after everything that's happened." My mother smiled. "I think it's a wonderful idea. Your father and I can help with the costs. The children deserve it." I stood in the doorway. They hadn't noticed me yet. "You're going on vacation?" My voice came out flat. They both jumped. Jennifer's face flushed. "Sarah, we didn't hear you come in." "You're planning a vacation. To Disney. With Mom and Dad's help." I looked between them. What happened to being broke? My mother's expression shifted to defensive. "Jennifer needs to maintain some normalcy for the children. We're helping her get back on her feet. You wouldn't understand. You don't have children. I gave you $28,000 3 months ago." "Yes, and we're very grateful," my mother said sharply. "That money went to necessary renovations. This is a separate matter. Your father and I have some savings we can use for the vacation." "But you couldn't use those savings 3 months ago? You needed mine instead?" Jennifer spoke up, her voice small. "It's only a few thousand, Sarah. Mom and Dad said they could manage it. The kids have been through so much." I looked at the kitchen around me. The new paint. The new appliances visible through the doorway into the renovated space. At Jennifer's phone showing Disney vacation packages. At my mother's face, defensive and irritated that I was questioning anything. And something in me finally, completely broke. My $28,000 hadn't gone to a crisis. It had gone to fund Jennifer's comfortable restart while my parents maintained their own savings for extras like vacations. There had been no crisis, or it had been grossly exaggerated, or they'd simply decided my money was easier to take than theirs. I turned and walked out without another word. I got in my car, my old, unreliable car with 200,000 miles, and drove home. That night, I spread out 15 years of bank statements across my living room floor. I calculated every transfer, every loan, every emergency. The total was $106,000. $106,000 I'd given them. And they were planning a Disney vacation while I worked double shifts to rebuild savings from zero. I sat on my floor, surrounded by evidence of 15 years of exploitation, and made a decision. I was done being silent. I was done making myself small. I was done waiting for them to love me. It was time for them to finally see exactly what they'd done. And the 3 months between that moment and Easter were the loneliest of my life. I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving. My mother texted, "We're keeping it small this year while Jennifer adjusts to her new situation. Hope you understand." I saw photos on social media later. 15 people around the table, including extended family. It wasn't small. I just wasn't wanted. I worked Thanksgiving Day at the hospital. It was easier than sitting alone in my apartment thinking about it. Christmas was the same. "Just immediate family this year," my mother said. The photos showed aunts, uncles, cousins. Apparently, immediate family meant everyone except me. During those months, I did something I'd never done before. I stopped protecting them. When colleagues asked about my family over the holidays, I told the truth. "I'm not invited," I'd say simply. They needed money, and when I gave them everything I had, they stopped including me in gatherings. Patricia heard these conversations. One day, after a particularly draining shift, she asked me to join her for coffee. "How much did you give them?" she asked directly. $106,000. Over 15 years. Patricia set down her coffee cup carefully. "Sarah, that's more than some people's houses cost." "I know." "And they're excluding you from family events." "Yes." "Why aren't you angrier?" I thought about that. I don't know. Maybe because I've spent 40 years teaching myself that anger isn't useful. That being needed is more important than being valued. That's not true. You know that's not true. I did know. Intellectually. But knowing something and feeling it are different things. In January, I learned through a cousin that Easter was being planned, a big family dinner at my parents' house. I wasn't mentioned in the group chat. When I texted my mother asking about it, her response was carefully casual. "We thought it would be better if you didn't come. You've been so stressed and negative lately. We want a peaceful holiday." I stared at that text for a long time. Stressed and negative. After giving them $106,000. After sacrificing 15 years of financial security. After working myself to exhaustion while they lived comfortably and planned Disney vacations. I was stressed and negative, so I wasn't welcome at their table. That's when I decided I would go anyway. I told Patricia about the text. I expected her to tell me to stay away, to protect myself. Instead, she said, "Do you remember when your mother invited me to Easter? Months ago, before all this?" She was so excited to have a successful doctor at her family dinner. She called me 3 times to make sure I was coming. I'd forgotten about that. I haven't, and I'm still invited, as far as I know. Patricia looked at me steadily. "I want to be there, Sarah. I want to see who these people really are." We made a plan. Patricia would arrive early, as my mother had originally requested. She wanted Patricia there early to meet everyone before dinner. Sarah would arrive at the actual dinner time. If my mother said something cruel, and based on that text message, she probably would, Patricia would be there to witness it. We weren't planning a dramatic scene. We weren't rehearsing confrontations. I just wanted to exist in my family's space one more time with someone present who actually saw my worth. I spent the week before Easter documenting everything. I created a folder with bank statements, text messages, emails requesting money. I calculated totals, highlighted patterns. I wrote a letter I never planned to give them, just to clarify my own thoughts. You took $106,000 from me over 15 years. You told me it was temporary, that you'd pay me back. That family helps family, but you never paid me back. You never even thanked me. You used my money to maintain your lifestyle, to fund Jennifer's choices, to keep up appearances. And when I had nothing left to give, you excluded me from the family. You called me stressed and negative for finally admitting I couldn't fund you anymore. I don't want revenge. And I just want you to see what you've done. I want someone to witness what you really think of me, so I can stop telling myself I'm imagining the cruelty. The night before Easter, Patricia invited me to her house. Her husband Tom and their daughter Emma were there. They knew everything. Emma, 17 and wise beyond her years, said something that made me cry. "Miss Sarah, my mom talks about how good you are at your job, how much you care about patients. That's real. Whatever your family thinks doesn't change who you actually are." It was the validation I'd needed from my family for 40 years, given freely by a teenager who barely knew me. "What do you want to happen tomorrow?" Patricia asked me later, after Tom and Emma had gone to bed. "I don't know. I just know I can't keep living like this. And I can't keep funding people who don't value me. I can't keep hoping they'll love me the way I need." "They might never change," Patricia warned. "Your mother might double down. Your sister might choose their side. You might lose them completely." "I think I already have," I said. "I just haven't admitted it yet." Patricia squeezed my hand. "Then tomorrow, whatever happens, you'll face it with someone who sees you standing beside you. You won't be alone." I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I kept imagining walking into my parents' house, hearing what they were saying about me, facing their reaction when they realized I'd heard. But I also imagined walking away after, driving home with Patricia, finally stopping the pretense that I had a family who loved me. And as terrifying as that was, yet it also felt like the beginning of something. Like the first deep breath after being underwater too long. Tomorrow, I would stop being invisible. Tomorrow, the truth would come out whether they wanted it to or not. Tomorrow, I would finally choose myself. The week before Easter, Patricia became my anchor in a way I hadn't known I needed. Dr. Patricia Chen was 45, an ER physician who'd worked alongside me for a decade. She'd grown up poor, the daughter of immigrants, and had worked her way through medical school while supporting her family. She'd set boundaries with them years ago, something she'd described as the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most necessary. She was married to Tom, a high school history teacher, and they had one daughter, Emma. Patricia was everything I wasn't. Confident, boundaried, comfortable saying no. She was what I might have become if I'd learned earlier that love shouldn't require disappearing. Monday evening, she invited me over. We sat in her kitchen while Tom grilled dinner outside and Emma did homework upstairs. "Walk me through what you want," Patricia said. "Not what you think you should want. What you actually want." I thought about it. I want to stop pretending everything is fine. I want someone to witness what they really think of me, so I stop telling myself I'm being oversensitive. And after, when they realize you heard them, when everything comes out, what do you want then? I don't know. That's okay, but we need to think about it. Patricia pulled out a notepad. She was practical like that. "If your mother says something cruel, what will you do? Walk out? Respond? Stay silent? I don't want to cause a scene." "You existing isn't causing a scene, Sarah. Your presence shouldn't be a disruption." We talked through scenarios. What if my mother tried to defend herself? What if Jennifer got angry? What if relatives demanded explanations? You don't owe them explanations, Patricia said firmly. They've had 15 years to explain why they took over $100,000 from you. You've had 40 years of explaining why you exist in their space. Enough. Tuesday evening, we discussed practical matters. My job security. Excellent. I was a valued nurse with 15 years of experience. My finances. Depleted but stable. I had enough for rent and basics. My support system. Weak. Mostly work friends. No close family besides this mess. You can stay with us if you need to, Tom offered when he joined us. Guest room is yours. We mean it. I almost cried at the casual generosity. They barely knew me outside of Patricia's work stories, and they were offering me shelter if my family imploded. Wednesday, Patricia shared her own story in detail. My family expected me to support my 3 brothers forever, she said. They called it family loyalty. I called it what it was: exploitation. When I set boundaries, they called me selfish, ungrateful, a bad daughter. They said I'd forgotten where I came from. How long did it last? The anger? About a year. Then it stopped. They adjusted. They found other resources. And I built a life I actually want to live. She looked at me steadily. You're not responsible for your sister's choices, her ex-husband's gambling, or your parents' financial decisions. You're responsible for your own life. That's not selfishness. That's survival. Thursday, she helped me understand my mother's psychology. She's not evil, Sarah. She's deeply insecure, measures her worth through her children's visible success, and has decided Jennifer is her success story. You're the reliable one she doesn't have to worry about. But that's not love. No, Patricia agreed. It's convenience. Real love celebrates all your children for who they are, not just the ones who reflect well on you. Friday, we prepared for Easter with realistic expectations. Your mother will probably say something hurtful, Patricia said. She's been doing it your whole life, just usually more privately. If I'm there and witness it, you'll have validation that you're not crazy. That's valuable, even if nothing else changes. What if she doesn't say anything? Then we have a nice dinner, and you know you weren't being excluded for good reason. Either way, you get information. If this resonates with you, if you've ever been the family member everyone depends on but no one values, please know you're not imagining it, and you deserve better. Saturday evening, Patricia and Tom invited me over one last time. Emma was there, and she knew the situation. Over dinner, she said something that broke me open. Miss Sarah, my mom talks about you all the time, about how good you are with patients, how you stay calm in emergencies, how you teach the new nurses. That's real. That's who you are. Whatever your family thinks doesn't change that. I cried. I couldn't help it. This 17-year-old girl had given me more validation in 30 seconds than my family had given me in 40 years. After dinner, Patricia and I sat on her back porch. Last chance to back out, she said. You can decide tomorrow morning that you'd rather just skip it. That's okay too. No, I said. I need to do this. I need to stop wondering if I'm imagining how bad it is. I need to hear it clearly so I can finally let go. Then I'll be there. When your mother says whatever she says, I'll be there. You won't face this alone. That night, I lay awake thinking about the next day, about walking into my parents' house, about hearing what they really thought of me when they didn't know I was listening. I was terrified. But I was also, for the first time in my life, ready to stop making myself smaller to fit into their idea of who I should be. Tomorrow, I would be exactly as big as I actually was. And if they couldn't handle that, then that was their problem, not mine. Easter Sunday. Patricia texted me at 2:15 p.m. Just arrived. Your mother is thrilled. She's already introduced me to half the family as Sarah's distinguished colleague. I smiled despite my nerves. My mother loved impressive people. She just didn't love me. At 2:45, Patricia texted again. They're moving to the dining room. I'm staying in the living room. I can hear everything. I sat in my car outside my apartment, the homemade cherry pie on the passenger seat. I'd made it last night after my shift, rolling out the crust by hand, pitting the cherries, doing everything from scratch because that's what my mother had said she wanted. At 3 p.m., I started driving. My parents lived 20 minutes away in a neighborhood of well-maintained houses with manicured lawns. I'd grown up in that house. I'd learned to ride a bike on that street. I'd sat in that living room doing homework while Jennifer watched TV. I'd spent 40 years trying to be good enough for the people who lived there. I parked on the street at 3:08 p.m. Through the windows, I could see movement. People gathered, celebrating, together. I picked up the pie and walked to the front door. It was unlocked, as it always was during family gatherings. I stepped inside quietly, not wanting to interrupt anything important. From the dining room, I heard my mother's voice clearly. "You're not welcome at this table." My heart stopped. Then, "I mean it. Sarah always brings negativity." I froze in the hallway. The pie trembled in my hands. My mother continued, her voice carrying that confidential tone she used when sharing complaints. She walks in with that martyred expression, like she's doing us a favor. Like working at the hospital makes her special. Like she's better than the rest of us. Jennifer's voice, uncomfortable. "Mom, she can probably hear you. She said she'd be here around 3. She's not here yet." I checked. My mother sounded certain. And honestly, I don't care if she hears. I'm tired of pretending. Every holiday, she shows up acting like we owe her something. She never contributes anything meaningful, just her presence and her judgment. This year, I decided we'd have a peaceful Easter without her. I couldn't move. I literally couldn't make my body move. My Aunt Carol's voice, hesitant. "That seems harsh." "Linda, is it?" My mother's voice grew stronger. "She's 42, single, no children, living in that sad little apartment. What does she have to contribute to a family gathering? Jennifer has given us grandchildren. She's built a real life. Sarah's just there, working all the time, acting exhausted, making us feel guilty for having normal family joy." Each word landed like a physical blow. I'd known they didn't value me, but hearing it said out loud with such certainty, such contempt, it was different from suspecting it. My mother continued, "I told her not to come today. I texted her last week. Maybe now she'll finally get the message." In the living room, around the corner from where I stood frozen, Patricia stood up. I saw her through the doorway, her expression unreadable but her jaw tight with controlled anger. She walked toward the dining room. The family must have looked up, surprised. I heard the sudden silence. Patricia's voice was calm, steady, and absolutely clear. "I'm afraid Sarah is here. She's in the hallway, and she heard everything you just said. As did I." The silence that followed was absolute. Then chaos. My mother's voice panicked. "Sarah, she's... How long?" Patricia continued, her voice cutting through the confusion. "I'm Dr. Patricia Chen. I've worked with Sarah for 10 years. I've watched her work double shifts to save lives, miss holidays to care for dying patients, receive awards for her dedication to patient care. I've also watched her sacrifice over $106,000 to this family over 15 years. Gasps. Someone dropped something, silverware clattering. Patricia wasn't done. "That sad little apartment you just mocked exists because she's funded Jennifer's life, your renovations, your parties. She's driving a car with 200,000 miles because she gave you her savings instead of replacing it. She's worked herself to exhaustion while you lived comfortably on her money. And this is how you speak about her when you think she can't hear?" I finally moved. I stepped into the doorway where I could see them all. My mother's face was white. Jennifer's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. My father sat frozen, his expression unreadable. Aunts and uncles looked between Patricia and me, shocked. Jennifer's children, thankfully, were in another room watching TV. I still held the pie. The card for my mother was in my jacket pocket. But I'd made them both after a 12-hour shift because I'd still been hoping, still been trying. My voice, when I found it, was quiet. It's all true. I have bank statements. Every loan you never repaid. Every crisis that turned out to be a vacation or a renovation. Every time you told me family helps family and then never helped me back. My mother found her voice. Sarah, I was speaking privately. You weren't supposed to hear? I cut her off, which I'd never done before. I wasn't supposed to hear how you really feel about me? That I contribute nothing meaningful? That my apartment is sad? That I make you feel guilty for having joy? That's not... I didn't mean... Yes, you did. My voice was still quiet, but there was something new in it. Certainty. You meant every word. You've always meant it. You just didn't know I was listening. Jennifer spoke, her voice shaking. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was going to... You've known for 15 years that I've been giving you money. You've known I paid for your wedding, your house repairs, your children's school. You've known I gave up buying a condo to help with your divorce expenses, and you never once thanked me. I thanked you. You promised to pay me back. You said someday. But someday never came, did it? Instead, you went on vacation while I worked overtime to rebuild savings from zero. The room erupted. Relatives demanding to know if Patricia's numbers were real, my mother trying to explain. My father silent, unable to meet my eyes. I raised my voice slightly, and which was enough to cut through the chaos. I came here today because I wanted to believe I still had a family. I brought pie I made after a 12-hour shift because I still hoped that if I did enough, gave enough, you'd see me as someone worth loving. I set the pie on the hall table carefully. It looked perfect. Golden crust, steam still rising slightly through the vents. But you don't. You see me as a sad single woman with a meaningless job and nothing to contribute. You see me as someone you have to tolerate, not celebrate. Someone whose money you'll take, but whose presence you don't want. My mother was crying now. That's not true. We love you. You love what I can give you. There's a difference. I pulled the card from my pocket and set it next to the pie. I'm done pretending that's the same thing. I turned to leave. Patricia moved to follow me, my mother's voice, desperate. Sarah, wait. Please. We can talk about this. I stopped, looked back at her. You've had 40 years to talk to me. You chose to talk about me instead. Then I walked out, Patricia beside me. Behind us, the room exploded into arguments. I heard my Aunt Carol's voice. How could you say those things? My Uncle Mike. $100,000? My father's voice, quiet. Jesus, Linda, what have we done? Jennifer calling after me. Sarah, please. But I kept walking. Patricia's hand was on my shoulder, steady and certain. We got into Patricia's car. She'd driven separately. I sat in the passenger seat, my hands shaking now that it was over. You did it, Patricia said quietly. You stopped being invisible. I started crying then. Not gentle tears, huge, gasping sobs that felt like they were being torn from my chest. 40 years of invisibility, of hoping, of trying, of being useful instead of loved. It all came out in that car. Patricia drove us to her house. Tom and Emma were waiting with takeout. They'd prepared for this, knowing I'd need somewhere to go. I spent Easter evening on Patricia's couch, surrounded by people who'd chosen to be there, who valued my presence instead of my usefulness. It was the first holiday in my life where I felt like I mattered, and it was the beginning of learning what family was actually supposed to feel like. The messages started within hours. My phone buzzed continuously as Patricia, Tom, Emma, and I ate Thai takeout in their living room. I finally looked at the screen. 17 missed calls from my mother, 8 from Jennifer, 5 from various relatives. I turned my phone off. "You don't have to deal with that tonight," Patricia said. "Tonight, you just rest." I stayed at Patricia's house that night. Emma gave me her favorite t-shirt to sleep in. Tom set up the guest room. Patricia made sure I had water and tissues beside the bed. I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying my mother's words in my head. Sad little apartment, nothing to contribute, acting exhausted, making us feel guilty. Monday morning, I turned my phone back on. The messages were worse than I'd expected. My mother had emailed a long, rambling message that was part justification, part blame. "Sarah, I can't believe you brought an outsider into our private family matters. I was speaking privately about my concerns. You weren't supposed to be there yet. You weren't supposed to hear that conversation. Yes, I was frustrated, but you've been so negative lately, so resistant to family gatherings. I was venting to people I trust. You've always been oversensitive. How can you do this to your family on Easter? Your sister is devastated. Your father won't speak. You've destroyed our family over words I didn't even mean for you to hear." I read it twice. Then I deleted it. Jennifer had texted, "I can't believe you brought Dr. Chen into this. That was our private family business. Mom is devastated. She said things she didn't mean out of stress. You know how she gets. Why did you have to make such a scene? We could have talked about this privately." Now the whole family is taking sides and people are asking me about the money, and I don't know what to say. "Please call me. We need to fix this." I replied once. She meant them. That's the problem. And the money, $106,000 over 15 years, is all documented. I'm not lying. I'm just finally not pretending anymore. Then I blocked her number. Over the next few days, extended family members reached out. My Aunt Carol called. "I always saw how differently they treated you. I should have said something. I'm so sorry." My cousin Derek texted, "You're causing family drama for attention. Grow up." My Uncle Mike sent a long message. "I didn't know about the money. If I had, I would have said something. Your parents always made it seem like they were supporting both you and Jennifer equally. They lied to all of us." Two cousins I barely knew reached out privately, sharing that they'd experienced similar dynamics in their own families, the responsible one who was expected to fund everyone else while being treated as lesser. I began to understand. I wasn't alone in this pattern. Family financial exploitation was common, it just wasn't talked about. Patricia helped me process. "They're not upset about what they did," she said during one of our long evening conversations. "They're upset they got caught. Your mother wasn't sorry for thinking those things. She was sorry you heard them." She was right. My mother's email never once said, "I'm sorry for what I said." Only, "Sorry, you heard it." Wednesday, after Easter, I sent one email to my parents and Jennifer. "I will not be attending family functions. I will not be providing financial support. I need distance to heal. Do not contact me. I will reach out if and when I'm ready. If you contact me anyway, I will block your numbers and emails. I'm serious." I blocked their numbers. I set their emails to filter into a folder I didn't check. Patricia asked me if I wanted to pursue legal action for the money. I thought about it for days. The money's gone, I finally decided. Fighting for it means years of being entangled with them. I'd rather be free. "That's your choice," Patricia said, though I could tell she disagreed. "Just know, you have options if you change your mind." The social consequences were mixed. Some relatives stopped speaking to me. Others quietly reached out with support. My parents told their version to anyone who'd listen. Sarah had a breakdown, became irrationally angry, ruined Easter over nothing, was always difficult and ungrateful. But Patricia's presence as a credible witness complicated their narrative. People wondered, would a successful physician lie about this? Would she risk her professional reputation to support a false accusation? The fact that I'd documented everything helped too. When relatives asked, I sent them the spreadsheet. 15 years of transactions, requests for loans, promises of repayment, total amounts. The numbers didn't lie. I started therapy in May. My therapist was a woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma. Our first session, she asked me to describe my relationship with my mother. I talked for 40 minutes straight. When I finished, she said gently, "Sarah, you've been experiencing emotional neglect and financial exploitation for 4 decades. That's not a family relationship, so that's abuse with a family label." Hearing it named, abuse, was both devastating and freeing. I joined a support group for people who'd experienced family financial exploitation. The stories were hauntingly similar: the responsible sibling, the favored sibling, the parents who took and took while offering nothing back, the guilt that made saying no feel impossible. I realized this wasn't unique to my family. It was a pattern, a dynamic that happened in thousands of families, hidden because talking about family financial abuse felt disloyal. By June, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a small condo. Patricia and Tom helped me move. The place was tiny, just 800 square feet. But it was mine. I'd earned it without giving it away to anyone else. I decorated it carefully. I bought art I liked. I chose furniture that made me happy. And I created a space that reflected my value, not my utility. At work, I stopped volunteering for every extra shift. I started taking real vacations, just weekends away, but actual time off. I began dating, tentatively. A few coffee dates, nothing serious, but trying. I built a chosen family: Patricia and Tom, Emma, who started calling me Aunt Sarah, a few colleagues from the hospital, members of my support group. In September, Jennifer emailed asking to talk. I didn't respond immediately. In therapy, I explored what reconciliation would require. "You can forgive them without reconciling," my therapist said. "You can wish them well from a distance, but letting them back in requires genuine change from them, not just regret at consequences, actual transformation." Do you see evidence of that? I didn't. Jennifer's email said she missed me, and it didn't say she understood what she'd done. It didn't offer repayment. It didn't acknowledge the exploitation. I decided no contact until I was stronger, and until they demonstrated actual change, not just desire for things to go back to how they were. 1 year after Easter, I was a different person. Not because I'd gotten revenge, not because they'd apologized or paid me back, but because I'd finally stopped measuring my worth by their inability to see it. I'd finally understood. I didn't lose my family on Easter. I lost the illusion that I'd ever had one. And what I gained? Self-respect, boundaries, a life where my worth wasn't transactional, was worth more than any amount of family approval. 18 months after Easter, I was sitting in my small condo on a Sunday morning when I realized I was happy. Not the desperate, people-pleasing, hoping for crumbs kind of happiness I'd accepted for 40 years. Real happiness. The kind that came from waking up in a space I'd chosen, with plans for the day that I actually wanted, surrounded by people who valued me. It was such a strange, quiet revelation that I almost didn't notice it. The relationship with my parents remained severed. They'd started sending checks, $200 every month, their own guilty gesture that I'd never requested. I didn't cash them. They sat in a drawer, accumulating. Eventually, I'd decide what to do with them. But for now, they existed as proof. They knew they'd done something wrong, even if they couldn't say it. My professional life had evolved in ways I hadn't expected. I was still a charge nurse, but I'd started mentoring new nurses with a different approach. I taught them about boundaries, with patients, with families, with themselves. I'd also started teaching a community college course on compassionate patient care. Once a week, I stood in front of 30 students and shared what I'd learned through 20 years in the ER. Last month, during a lecture, a student asked a question that felt important. How do you not take it personally when patients' families don't visit? When you can see someone is lonely and their family just doesn't show up? I thought about it carefully before answering. You'll meet patients whose families don't visit, don't call, don't value them. You'll be tempted to judge, to think they must have done something to deserve that neglect. Don't. Sometimes families fail people for no good reason. Your job is to see each patient's inherent worth, each regardless of whether their family does. Because that recognition, that basic human dignity, might be the only place they receive it. A student in the back raised her hand. But how do you not burn out from witnessing that? How do you not take on their pain? I smiled, thinking about Patricia and Tom and Emma and all the people who'd chosen to love me. You build a life where your worth isn't dependent on people who can't see it. You find people who do see it, and you learn to see it yourself. I was dating someone now. Greg, a high school teacher who was divorced with a college-age daughter. We'd met at a hospital fundraiser where he'd been volunteering. It was slow, careful, but genuine. He'd never asked me for money. He valued my work. He respected my boundaries. When I told him about my family, he'd listened and said simply, "That must have been incredibly painful. I'm glad you got out." He didn't try to fix it or explain it away. He just acknowledged it. That simple validation meant more than I could explain. My chosen family had deepened. Patricia and Tom's house was where I spent most holidays now. Emma was 17, applying to colleges, occasionally asking me for advice about handling her own family dynamics. I had dinner every week with a rotating group of colleagues who'd become real friends. I celebrated birthdays with people who actually remembered them. Have you ever wondered what family is supposed to feel like? I was learning. It was supposed to feel like Patricia making sure I had a key to her house, in case you ever need it. It was supposed to feel like Tom including me in his dad jokes, and treating me like I'd always been part of their family. It was supposed to feel like Emma texting me photos of her college acceptance letters because she knew I'd be proud. Family was supposed to feel like people choosing you, not obligating you. 3 months ago, I'd encountered my mother by chance in the hospital waiting room. My father was having a routine procedure, nothing serious, but my mother had been there early, anxious. We'd seen each other across the room. It was unavoidable. She looked older, smaller somehow. Her hair had more gray. She looked diminished. She'd approached me hesitantly. "Sarah, your father would like to see you." After his procedure. I'd felt the old pull, the trained response to accommodate, to be useful, to say yes. But I was different now. "I hope his procedure goes well," I'd said quietly. "But I'm not ready for contact." Her face had hardened. "You're going to hold a grudge forever? Over words I didn't even mean for you to hear?" And there it was. The thing I'd needed to hear. "That's exactly the problem," I'd said. "You meant them. You've always meant them. You just didn't want me to know. And I deserve better than someone who only values me when I can't hear how little they value me." I'd walked away. It had hurt. But I hadn't broken. Last Sunday, I hosted Easter dinner at my condo. Patricia and Tom, Emma, Greg and his daughter Maya, 2 colleagues from the hospital, and Diana, the facilitator from my support group. 9 people in my small space, laughing and talking and genuinely happy to be there. Emma brought up the infamous Easter from 2 years ago. "Tell the story," she begged. "Patricia's version is hilarious." Patricia launched into it, embellishing for comedy, making everyone laugh. When she finished, someone asked the question I'd been waiting for. "But seriously, Sarah, do you regret it? Going there that day? Hearing what you heard?" I thought about it carefully. I regret that I needed to hear it to believe it. I regret the years I wasted hoping they'd change, but I don't regret knowing the truth. Because the truth, even when it's devastating, is what set me free. I looked around my table, at people who'd chosen to be there, who valued my presence, who celebrated my work and my worth. "My mother said I wasn't welcome at their table," I continued. "But that was the day I realized I didn't want to be. Because this," I gestured to everyone gathered in my small condo. "This is what a table should feel like. Where everyone's welcome. Where everyone matters. Where love doesn't have a price tag." Greg squeezed my hand. Patricia raised her glass. Emma grinned at me across the table. Later, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up, I found myself thinking about the video I'd recorded last month for an online support group. I'd sat in front of my laptop camera and spoken directly to people experiencing what I'd experienced. For 40 years, I believed love meant sacrifice. I thought if I gave enough, did enough, was useful enough, my family would value me. But love doesn't require you to disappear. Love doesn't demand your money and give back contempt. That's not love. That's exploitation with a family label. The video had been viewed over 50,000 times. The comments were full of people sharing their own stories, their own moments of choosing themselves. I'd continued. If you're the family ATM, the one who's always helping but never helped, the one whose achievements don't count but whose money does, hear this. You're not imagining it. You're not oversensitive. And you deserve better. Leaving or setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is love yourself enough to stop accepting crumbs and calling it family. Now, standing in my small kitchen, I felt the truth of those words in my bones. I was 43 years old. I lived in a tiny condo that I'd earned myself, and I had a job I loved and a chosen family that actually wanted me there. I was building a life where my worth was inherent, not earned through sacrifice. I wasn't rich. I wasn't traditionally successful. I didn't have the big house or the perfect family or the impressive social media presence, but I had myself. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. My mother had said I wasn't welcome at her table. But she'd done me a favor, really. Because being forced to leave that table had taught me to build my own. And my table? My table had room for everyone who chose to be there. My table celebrated people for who they were, not what they could give. My table was built on genuine love, not obligation. That Easter dinner 2 years ago had felt like an ending. And it was. The end of believing I could earn love through usefulness, at the end of sacrificing myself for people who'd never value me, the end of being invisible. But it was also a beginning. The beginning of learning what family could actually be. The beginning of understanding my own worth. The beginning of a life where I finally mattered. Not because I'd proven myself useful, but because I'd chosen to be seen. And that choice, that moment of standing in my parents' hallway and refusing to disappear anymore, had saved my life. I wasn't welcome at their table, but I'd built a better one. And the people sitting around it? They were the real family I'd been searching for all along.